It seems like the Tomorrowverse might be the last interconnected DC animated universe across a series of digital released films, as Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1, 2, and 3, the Crisis on Infinite Earths trilogy, is set to release in 2024 with the first installment coming out around January 9th. And there was an article coming out saying how this 3-part event will actually end the Tomorrowverse, as any character arcs or story beats or things that they were leading up to will all culminate to an end on Crisis on Infinite Earths. And honestly, the best way to describe the Tomorrowverse is wasted potential. I've never seen a more wasted DC universe other than, I guess, like the DCEU, because at least with the DCEU it lasted for like a decade or so, but with the Tomorrowverse it only started back in 2020. Like, there were so many aspects of the DC universe that were left to be explored, and yet it's like, oh, we're already jumping into a Crisis event that's gonna essentially end this whole universe. And you would think that maybe it's like, oh, maybe they'll just do like another reboot, but that would be stupid. It's like, why would you end this universe when it's only like 3 to 4 years in and then just do another one? I think the reason why this is happening, I don't think the plan was to end this universe with Crisis on Infinite Earths. You can tell that they were definitely planning for more installments and portray more stories that cover aspects of the DC universe we haven't seen in animation yet. So maybe more Justice League team-ups, more Batman, Superman films, Wonder Woman, stuff like that. Probably is no coincidence. This is also happening around the same time where James Gunn's DCU is coming in about, and obviously with the big emphasis with James Gunn's DCU is the interconnectivity of it all across different types of media. So it's not just live action movies and shows, also like animation and potentially a little bit of gaming, but mostly on the stuff that you could like either watch on the big screen or like on a streaming service. The only Justice League movie, quote unquote, that we actually got in this universe was Justice League Warworld, which is the last movie that we've got before Crisis on Infinite Earths comes out. But it wasn't even really a Justice League movie. It was just a Trinity movie featuring Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman with a very lackluster plot, and there's a lot left to be desired. It's mostly used as a setup for Crisis on Infinite Earths, so there really is no weight to that story. And like I said, there are a lot of aspects of this universe that were skipped over, like the formation of the Justice League, and I'm guessing the formation of the Bat family, because the only Batman entry we got in this universe was the Long Halloween 2-parter, but that took place around like year 2 or so of Batman's career. But in the Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths trailer, we see like Robin and Batgirl, so that's just yet another thing that they skipped over. It's like, that would have been kind of cool to see, but whatever, I guess. And on top of that, the only iteration of Superman we got alongside with Batman is like in their younger years, as Superman Man of Tomorrow, the only Superman movie in this universe, was more so an origin story of him trying to figure out how to become Superman and his impact on other heroes like either Martian Manhunter or other DC characters like Lobo. I'd say about like half of the movies in this universe were good, while the other half are just kind of like mediocre or just not great in my opinion. The ones that I value less in terms of quality or things, or the ones I just don't really think are that good, like Green Lantern Beware My Power, Legion of Superheroes, Justice League Warworld, I think are not, they kind of missed the mark with those ones, but the other ones I think are solid enough, like Justice Society World War II, obviously the Long Halloween 2-parter, Superman Man of Tomorrow. And even though the previous DCEU had its somewhat fair share of problems, it still put a pretty big emphasis on like character arc and growth, especially with characters like Damian Wayne. You saw him grow over the course of the years that spanned that universe, from Son of Batman all the way to like Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. And you saw many elements like with the Justice League, the Teen Titans, you saw plenty of Batman. Wonder Woman got her own film. They were able to adapt the Death of Superman and Reign of Superman storyline from the comics. There was just nothing substantial about this universe that made it make sense that this would all culminate in a Crisis on Infinite Earths film, other than the very end of Justice League Warworld. Like, not even like the main course of the film leads up to Crisis. It's only like the very tag end on some like Deus Ex Machina type timing. I made a video a while back kind of going over it.
The 3 of you are needed. You will come with me now. A handful of lives on a single planet. That is nothing compared to the crisis that is to come. The absolute annihilation of everything, everywhere.
Okay. It kind of comes out of nowhere, and one of my main concerns was that they were gonna kind of rush it and not give it the proper time to like fully flesh out the storyline, as it's just such a big event for DC. But it does get my hopes up that they are splitting this into 3 parts, which I think this would be the first time a DC animated movie was split into 3. It's either usually like 1 to 2, but yeah, like the fact that it is a 3-parter makes sense because it's such a big event, you know, with like the multiverse and like the Earth's being destroyed and like the threat of the Anti-Monitor and seeing different versions of DC characters. On the plus side of the Tomorrowverse ending in 2024, I think this gives the opportunity for DC animation to go back to its roots on delivering high quality products, because for the past several years DC animation has been kind of on like a steadily decline in terms of quality of the films that they produce. Like they just don't have that spark that made some of the pre-Flashpoint movies work really well, like Wonder Woman 2009, you know, the Batman movies like Year One, Under the Red Hood, The Dark Knight Returns. They also have like All-Star Superman, Justice League Doom, Crisis on Two Earths. Like those movies really stand out because they aren't limited by a single continuity. Like they more so are focused on like either adapting stories from the comics or maybe tweaking them slightly to, you know, give us like an hour 15-minute animated movie. And they all didn't necessarily have the exact same animation and art style, and that's the one thing I really liked about DC animation back in the day. But ever since Justice League Flashpoint Paradox, you know, with the DCEU or with the Tomorrowverse, they all look the same, they all feel the same, so you don't really get much out of watching these movies. You're like, hey, I feel like I've already seen this, and it kind of hinders what adaptation that you're trying to do. Let's say you're doing like what they did with Batman Hush in the DCEU. I was hoping before the movie came out that it'd be kind of like a standalone thing, adapt more from the comics, but since they're hindered to the continuity of the DCEU, there was no Jason Todd, there was no Tim Drake, there was a lot of villains that were missing from that book, like, you know, Batman fighting Ra's al Ghul, because guess what, they killed Ra's al Ghul in Son of Batman. Some of the best DC animated movies like Batman Year One or The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2 are literally direct adaptations of the book. Like it's almost like one-to-one if you think about it. Like some of the dialogues they're saying, and even if it's a little different, they don't take any creative liberties when it comes to adapting these stories. And I think that's been a really big problem with some of the newer stuff for the DC animation. They take too many creative liberties when adapting popular comic book stories. I have no idea if that'll change, but I do think it's better for DC animation to focus more on like standalone stories like they're doing with Watchmen. There's supposed to be a Watchmen animated movie also releasing in 2024 that isn't connected to the Tomorrowverse. For example, the art style in the Batman Long Halloween 2-parter, they initially wanted to have a more Tim Sale inspired approach to its visual aesthetic, but they couldn't do that because they had to make this movie a part of the Tomorrowverse, and every Tomorrowverse movie looks the same. They all have like that kind of Archer-esque with like the bold lines on the characters, and they all have the same animation. And hopefully, since there will be no longer an interconnected animated movie universe outside of the main DCU, maybe like since I'm assuming there'll be less produced DC animated movies, but hopefully that'll give them more time, help polish the animation and make them look nicer, as that's been kind of an issue with DC animation. It's been kind of cheap looking as of late, not bad, but could be a lot better. So yeah, obviously it's not going to be like we'll never get DC animated movies ever again. I still think we will, but I think the only time we will get a DC animated movie a part of a universe will be with James Gunn's DCU, regardless if they would be either theatrical or straight to streaming or straight to digital, whatever approach they do. But I do definitely believe we will still get more standalone projects that don't really have to do anything. They'll just fit under the Elseworlds category with like everything else that isn't connected to the main DCU. And I think that is the best approach to DC. Most favored aspect of any DC adaptation is their animation, you know, with like their cartoons and their animated movies. It's just kind of weird to see how DC struggles with interconnectivity with any universe since like the DCEU. The DCEU was like the last time they had a really good like interconnected universe across film or TV over a long period of time. You know, with like the Arrowverse has had its fair share of problems. Everybody knows how much of a mess the DCEU was, even though this is somewhat an end of an era for DC. But I do think the future is going to look a lot brighter, and hopefully they will take the time to make the quality products that DC fans have been yearning for many years now.